Welcome to the Aeropedia Podcast. I'm Ashwin.
And I'm Peter. And today we have the pleasure of having Shelley Svoren with us. Shelley's CEO and founder of Infinite Branches that works with startup businesses and investors to build sustainable organizations within the global aviation industry. As a recovering banker, federal banking regulator, investor, and corporate financier for consumer, retail, and technology companies, Shelley's experiences over the course of her 30-plus year career are diverse and complex. She serves on the board of the International Aviation Women's Association as the network's VP Leader Development and supports the activities of the scholarship, mentorship, and leadership development communities. She earned her BS from the University of Oregon with a focus in finance, economics, and Scandinavian studies, and continues coursework to expand her knowledge of fintech, business aviation, and next-generation aviation industries. So let's get in and get to know Shelley.
Shelley, thanks for joining us on the Aeropedia Podcast. Really excited to get to know you and your background a bit better. So let's start there, right? Just walk us through your professional journey and all of the cool stuff that you've done so far, and explain to us what you're doing right now.
Well, I'll try and be brief, but my career has been a lot like this wonderful 14% grade traveling route that's famously known in Norway called Trostien. And if you've ever been up it, you can see it is just this crazy winding path, but at the end of the day, it does make sense. I was pretty fortunate that when I graduated from the University of Oregon in 1992, that I had a job waiting for me, which wasn't the case back then. It was a difficult economic cycle, and I went to work for the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Totally not aviation related. What that is, it's a regulatory agency, and we were reviewing the safety and soundness, and that's a defined term of the financial institutions that we were required to review based upon their particular charter. And I was traveling around. I did that for 3.5 years. I was on the road 85% of the time. I learned a lot, more so than I think I ever could have learned attending college. And that's what you want for every single point in your career. You want to be curious, you want to ask questions, you want to be exposed to different situations. But I was newly married and traveling 80% of the time, and I wanted something that allowed me to have much more time with my family and with my friends. And I did a 180-degree turn, pretty much. And I went to work for Silicon Valley Bank on their technology side. And at that time, Silicon Valley Bank was under an executive order, a memorandum of understanding, so they had to improve. And it was a great time to be a part of that organization because everyone was focused on improving and getting deeper and learning more and creating greater relationships within the industry. And it truly was at Silicon Valley Bank that I learned about how to build relationships while conducting transactions. And that is one of my greatest takeaways from spending time at Silicon Valley Bank, watching some of my colleagues who I truly admire still to this day, how they navigated the complexities of financing startup technology companies and building relationships that lasted them for the past 20, 30 years. While I was there, we were living in the Pacific Northwest, and I was very curious about learning more about the Oregon wine industry. That was one of the things that my spouse and I decided to do after all the traveling I was doing. On the weekends, I could have sat on the sofa and relaxed, or I could go out and we could have a good time with our friends and learn a little bit more about something. And that happened to be wine. And I got curious. I wrote a white paper on how to do business in the industry. The team from the Napa Valley came up to conduct business. I handed over that article, and lo and behold, 3 months later, there was an opportunity for a promotion and a corporate move, and I took it. So my husband and I and our 2 cats and dog at the time relocated from Portland, Oregon down to the Napa Valley, and we've been here for 26 years. Along the way, I went out into the industry because I was so busy looking at the end results and creating a line of credit or term loans or financing some specific asset for these clients. I really wanted to understand how do you even create these financial statements? I mean, I know conceptually how to do it, and that was my background in college, but to actually do it was what I wanted to accomplish. I wanted to have that tool in my toolkit. So I worked for multiple large corporations, multinational corporations, creating their budgets, reviewing who was doing what and how they were getting it done right, where they were exceeding, where we had opportunities to improve. One of the organizations I worked at was Agilent Technologies right after they spun out of Hewlett Packard. I also had the great opportunity to work for South Corp Wines, which at the time was the largest Australian wine conglomerate. And I created a budget for their North American operations that was about $750 million. And it was a lot of fun because it wasn't just about creating numbers. It was learning about how things were done, working with the PR, the marketing, and the sales team. And I really enjoyed that. So along the way, I think that what really drove me was I want to know how somebody does something. I don't want to sit here by myself and be checking boxes. I want to learn, how do I create value? How do you create value? How can we work together? After having my two sons, I had a former colleague at Silicon Valley Bank call me up and say, I could use your help. They had relocated to First Republic Bank and wanted to start the wine lending team there. So I said, okay, I'll do it part-time. I valued being a mom, but I also missed working too. And they created an opportunity for me to have a flexible working environment. So I helped co-author their lending policy. I conducted the underwriting. I worked with our legal teams in order to get that particular niche lending unit up and running. And in 2006, my now former boss came on board to finance what most people refer to as private aircraft. Business aircraft is what we in the industry like to call it because it is used for business, and also finance yachts. And I thought that that was really cool because my father was a Marine Corps helicopter pilot. He was a colonel, and he took me out of class sometimes to go fly the simulators. We'd go into the hangars. I'd get to look at logbooks and records, but I never saw anybody who looked like me. And I knew what he did, but I thought that that might be pretty much between that and the mechanic. That might be the only jobs in the industry. So this broadened my mind. And I saw a great opportunity to join this person and help get their practice up and running. And over the course of the 13 years we worked together, we put on over 1.1 billion in loans without a single loss or a single repossession. And you have to remember that shortly after we started that, we had the economic downturn of 2008. And people would like to say, oh, you only finance assets for really wealthy people. Well, when really wealthy people hit hard times, it is exponentially larger than what happens for you and I. And this is where having a healthy dose of curiosity and finding people and building relationships with them really does matter. I'd ask, how do you make your money? How am I going to be repaid? Which is the first tenet of banking. How are you going to be repaid? And we'd have these great conversations. So I financed aircraft for people in 20, 30 different industries when it comes down to it. And I made a point of never making an assumption. So when we talk about the frame of what allowed me to do what I've done and all the twists and turns along the way, it's that level of curiosity and the desire to build partnerships that allowed me to continue to move myself forward in my career and bring others with me. Now, you asked, what am I doing today? In April of 2021, I decided I had been doing what I'd been doing long enough. It was time for me to move on. But I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And I had a number of friends in the industry, some of whom were executive recruiters and career coaches, say to me, you've made a point of getting to know a lot of people in your industry. Use that Rolodex and figure out how you can support people and also create a business out of it. And so what I do, I work with businesses to identify where their weak spots are and allow them to take advantage of the opportunities that they have. That sounds really nebulous, but I will say in a couple of clients that I'm working with today, we're completely rewriting their business plan. We are revising, essentially throwing out the pricing model and redoing that. We're looking at who we want to partner with, what jobs we have in-house. Do these make sense? We're here where we are today, and that's what got us. The past is what brought us to where we are, but where do we want to be in the future, and how do we get there, and who do we need to bring with us? So some of those strategic questions are where I help my clients focus so that they can succeed.
That's awesome. That's quite some experience there. So currently what you're doing, how much of that is, industry specific, or, are you, heavily involved still with the aircraft financing piece, or is there a wine industry component still here, or are there other industries involved?
Well, I do touch a couple of industries, as you pointed out, aviation, wine. There's also a small segment that's art as well as maritime. So I really take a look at the clients and what is it that they need. The financing is a tiny piece of it. And some clients never want to finance, but they do want to make sure that they have the right team in place to allow them to do whatever it is they need to do. In some instances, I've been able to save my clients high seven figures because I help them see that the plan that somebody else had provided to them did not ultimately make sense for them. And that's a good feeling to know that you have been a steward of your client's interests.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I appreciate how, so many that get touched by the aviation industry come from a variety of backgrounds. And I think yours is testament to that, and how you had aspects of your life that were touched by aviation, but then you went down a different path and then came back around and were involved with that. So one question I had, in your current role as you're working with clients to look at their portfolios and how they operate in that, can you give some examples of how aviation and how you utilize and evaluate aviation as a piece of a portfolio, and what value it brings, and how you quantify that for your clients?
Well, first of all, Peter, that's a great question. And thank you for asking that. You pointed out something that is really important. Aviation is a piece of people's portfolio. And I like to say it in a different way. Using business aviation is an investment in your brand. I mean, it is a decision to use business aviation in whatever it is you decide to do. You can take commercial, but there is other areas that you have to quantify first. And a lot of times it doesn't necessarily come down to cost. It is, what do you want to achieve? How are you flying? Where are you flying? Ultimately, what do you think the utilization will be? How is it going to affect other members of your team? Who will be on it? When will they be on it? How are you going to insure it? Where is the aircraft going to be hangared? And you have to start taking a look at all of these items. Recently, I talked a client out of buying an aircraft, and I know that sounds really crazy, but when you took a look at how they were going to use it and the reason that they were going to use it and the utilization rate for which they were going to use it, it really didn't make sense for them. Other clients, it has made complete change to the effectiveness of the executive team, and it allowed them to realize the vision and the mission of the company, particularly during difficult times. Not quite like what we had with the CrowdStrike download, but in other situations that I've been fortunate to see how business aviation owned and operated through the legal means to do so, because that can be a little complex, how that can ultimately positively impact the brand. And let's talk about that. The investment in your brand. Well, who built your brand? It is your people. And by allowing them to be much more efficient and to go to places to see clients, to see prospects, to see their suppliers, and to come home quickly and efficiently, you allow them to continue to build that brand.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And so no, this is cool on so many levels. Number one is because you're really providing qualitative metrics as well as quantitative, right? When to make a business case to actually fly business versus commercial, right? The second thing why I think this is cool, and this just hits right at the theme of the podcast, is there's so many folks out there in finance or accounting or other practices that are not in aviation that have always been fascinated about, can I use my skills in other industries? And I feel you're the perfect examples of using those skills in so many industries, right? Because the fundamentals can be taken and used. And so this is so cool. So on that note, I wanted to ask you, what do you think folks need to do in order to get to where you are? I.e., they're in one industry, they have a certain set of skills in finance, for example, but they want to utilize them for other projects or in other industries, namely aviation or business aviation, to be more specific. How should they navigate through these I would say decisions, essentially?
When I started out, there was no such thing as LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is this treasure chest of opportunities to connect with people, to learn more about what they do. And what I would recommend to anyone who is a financier and wants to learn more about the aviation industry, just do it. Find people online who are doing something that you have an interest in learning more about. Set up a time to have a conversation with them, DM them, find out more about them. People like talking about themselves and sharing their experiences. And when you get to a certain age as well, you want to be able to give back. So I would highly recommend people to not be shy and not wait for something to come to you, but pursue it.
It's great advice, and I'm sure many will take that to heart. And I guess my next question for you is around the utilization of aviation. And do you feel that, you said there's a lot of complexity in evaluating which modes of aviation and whether it makes sense and that. Is there anything the industry can do to, or has missed the boat on, if you will, to make it simpler and easier? And do you think there's some opportunity for the industry to change to make it easier in the future?
Well, we're talking about a highly regulated industry. So unless the federal government decides to make, bonus depreciation less complex, if states created one set taxing authority that was utilized across everything, every single state and every single municipality, you're still going to deal with a level of complexity. So I think ultimately, and this is just my opinion, we can be curious and recognize what those pain points are and seek out the experts who know what those complexities are. I don't know if people realize how truly complex it is to fly one particular leg of a business operation, but the care that goes into it, the planning that goes into it. I was working with one client who focuses on charter activity, and she said, literally, it takes at least anywhere between 10 to 15 people to make that flight occur. And it is a truly complicated industry, but by building the team and being honest with yourself and saying, I don't know what I don't know, but I'm going to find the right people who are going to work with me on this, that's where the opportunities lie. And I've always tried to seek those subject matter experts out. This is such a massive industry just within the US. And as you leave it and go to different locations throughout the world, it is equally complex. Not intentionally, but what goes up in the air, you do have to have a standard of safety. So I look at this and I say to my younger self who walked through those hangars, there's not just two jobs in this industry. Shasta Ways and Michael Wilds, who run Dream Soar and the Talent Pledge, shared with me that there are over 850 jobs in the global aviation industry. 850. So there are so many opportunities for people to become involved in this industry that have very little to do with becoming a pilot, but they have respect for every single member of the global team that make flying happen.
That's going to have to be a trivia question. You just gave us one, Shelley.
Yeah.
850 different job types.
Well, I leave that to the great Shasta Ways and Michael Wilds. So they and the great work that they're doing to promote the industry.
That's excellent.
Awesome. And so one of the penultimate questions I had was within all the great work you've done, and let's stay with aviation since this is the aviation podcast. What do you think is your biggest win so far, right? And give us an example if you can.
Well, if we're talking about things unrelated to work, one of my biggest wins is saying yes to joining the board of the International Aviation Women's Association. I've really redefined what it is to support others particularly women in this industry. And by stepping into the position that I'm in as the VP of Leader Development, we've refined how we view scholarships and building partnerships. We have developed, and I say we, I often get the credit for it, but no, it was a collective effort of people who started our mentoring program, which is in its third year. And we have received support in the form of a grant from the ISTAT Foundation for the past 3 consecutive years. But the bigger issue is that we've seen our members who are either still at university or early in their careers. We have seen about a quarter to a third of the people who have participated take steps forward in their career. That's a function of the people who are involved and their willingness to support each other and grow in the process. And one of the things that I'm really excited about, but it's still a little bit under wraps, is where we're headed with our career growth committee activities and building a program specifically to accelerate women who are in the middle of their career. So collectively, this supports all of our members. And men can join Iowa too. But that is one thing that I am truly excited about. Professionally, the ability to learn, to grow, to support my clients and their needs, to be a problem solver and a relationship builder, and thinking forward to how do we make this business sustainable. Sustainability tends to be conflated these days with alternative forms of what have you. But I like to think of sustainability as setting the foundation of a business right. The right people, the right product, and the right partnerships. And so that's what I'm truly devoted to. And seeing how I've been able to support my clients, however short or however long we've been together, that's been very gratifying to see them grow.
Awesome. Yeah, and you kind of beat me to the punch because it was my penultimate question, and then I was gonna ask you about the IAWA. But it's awesome that you brought it up, and we've had previous guests on the podcast that also have a very close linkage to IAWA, and hopefully we continue to have leaders in the future, and hopefully even students and other folks that continue to inspire the future generations of aviation professionals, and also inspire women to join the industry. So thanks for all of that.
Well, I certainly appreciate your openness and finding these amazing leaders who I know they're out there and highlighting them.
Awesome. So we'll transition to the next phase of the podcast, and this is more rapid fire questions, just to get to know you a bit better. So can you name one hard skill and one soft skill that you feel is really critical to succeed in your role today?
Oh, you must be curious. Absolutely must be curious and be tenacious in finding the answers to your curiosity. As far as a hard skill, that's a great question. I haven't really thought about that. I think you have to have a spectrum of skills, and so I wouldn't say one is more important than the other. I like to see people continue to invest in themselves, because what is a critical skill today may be obsolete because of AI in 2-3 years from now. So, but learn about finance, learn about accounting. Those will always serve you no matter what industry you're in.
Yeah, well said. Especially finance and accounting, right? I feel they're underrated in many cases, right? And they're so applicable across different different industries, different jobs. The next question is, what's your fondest aviation memory?
I have so many of them, but let's start with the very first one. It was my dad who took me out of class one day to play hooky and go fly the simulators when I was a senior in high school. And that was great. I was sitting in the back of the sim for a little while, and then he and his partner said, "Oh, let's let the little girl fly the simulator." And it was a whole lot harder than what I had expected. And that instilled a great respect for how complicated flying truly was and what a gift it is to the world to have people who are so dedicated to continue to learn how to keep us safe while we move across the world.
Awesome. That's a great experience. What part of aviation do you feel is least understood by the general public, and what can they do to learn more?
There's segments of the industry that are truly misunderstood, and I would say financing aircraft is one. Where do you go to learn about that? There's a number of blogs that you can reach out to, but one, I'll go back to, I had two clients that were focused on aircraft charter and one that was looking to start a Part 135 operation. And I feel like charter is completely misunderstood. And the reason why I say that is when we did the math and started looking at the numbers, just the sheer number of aircraft brokers that are out there and how little experience and education and certification there is. Most people tend to think about price and price sensitivity when it comes to charter. And I would say, be careful what you're paying for and look at what you're not paying for. Do a lot of research and find a great broker. If you're looking at a charter card, look into the finances of that particular company. Make sure that I don't want to say investment because that's an inappropriate word to use for this, but if you're going to utilize a service, make sure that that company will be around when you need to use that service, particularly if you are paying funds in advance.
Oh, that's golden advice. Thanks. And the last question here is, tell us about your favorite flight leg experience. What airline was it? What aircraft was it? Where were you going, etc.?
My favorite flight leg was coming back from, my husband's a Norwegian citizen. He just received his dual citizen in the US, and our sons hold dual citizenship as well. So we were coming back from Norway to the US, and we had multiple legs broken up, and we had upgraded on the final leg between Heathrow and San Francisco on British Airways. And our youngest son was I want to say he was 4 or 5 years old. So, and it was a morning flight, and first class on BA was delightful in and of itself. But the crew took such a liking to him. They essentially made him one of their own, and they even have gloves on him. And so he was helping them out and just having a good time, because for him being the age that he was, to sit still for that length of time, I had anxiety about that. What are we going to do to keep him busy? Oh, we didn't have to worry about it because he was helping the crew and having a great time doing it. So for me, that stands out as one of my all-time favorite experiences. I just got to sit back and enjoy the flight and enjoy my time up in the air, and as did our whole family.
And him serving you continued in his life, right? Kept doing that when you got home?
You're funny, Peter.
Yeah, but it's such a valuable experience, that one, and I'm sure you'll cherish it for the rest of your life. For sure. Yeah. Thanks, Shelley, for that. We're gonna transition to the next section of the podcast now. Peter, what is that section?
All right, Shelley. Well, this is your trivia round. We for every guest we have on our podcast, we go through 5 trivia questions around aviation, and it's no worries if you don't get them right. We really do it for education and just have a little bit of fun. So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. All right. Your first question. Can you name the aircraft type that has this tail cone? And for those that are listening in on the podcast, it's a very squared off rectangular shaped tail cone of an airliner.
Wow, that's unique. I don't know what that is. I can't say I've ever seen it before.
Right. Ashwin, do you want to take a gander or guess?
I want to say 737 old generation.
It is 777, actually.
Wow.
The Boeing 777 has that squared off tail cone with APU exhaust coming out there. All right. Next question. Airports. Can you name the airport that is home to this distinctive new terminal? It's called Terminal 2E, that includes an active waterfall and quite lush landscaping for any terminal I've seen. So
That is stunning. And are those fish?
yes, I think they have an aquarium also that above the terminal.
That's amazing. I don't know where it is, but boy, would I like to visit.
Might be your next favorite adventure or trip.
Exactly.
This is actually Singapore, Changi Airport.
I was wondering if that was Singapore. That's
is.
absolutely stunning.
This new Terminal 2E. I haven't been there either to the new one, so I'm excited to see that. All right, we're getting technical.
Ooh.
Sorry for everyone. But aircraft equipment. So this airplane, you can see there's a wire that connects the tail to the top of the airplane, and not all aircraft have this. But do you have any venture a guess as to what this wire what purpose it serves?
I'm not familiar with that, but that is really unusual. So I would love to learn more about why it's there.
And we hope it's not holding it together.
Well, you're reading my mind. You're reading my mind on that.
Ashwin, do you know what the purpose is?
I don't know. I was thinking fly-by-wire, but that's not absolutely right. But is it to protect the front of the tail from something?
Nope, it isn't. It's actually an antenna. So it's a high frequency antenna, and many more modern aircraft have it integrated into the leading edge of the tail. But on older aircraft, and especially airplanes that weren't designed for long range or over water flights initially, they would add this because it's used for communication when there isn't a very high frequency or VHF signal available. So it's a high frequency antenna.
And the wire would stay as is at whatever 30,000-40,000 feet at high speeds?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. It was a permanent fixture to the airplane that, just stayed connected there between the tail and the roof of the airplane. So kind of unique. All right. We're doing codes. So there's a lot of codes in the aviation world. This one is an ICAO code, and it's EHAM, Echo Hilo Alpha Mike, which I'll give a hint. It is an airport code.
I would have to look that up. It's not something that is on my radar, that I've ever financed an aircraft that was hangared there.
So Peter, maybe you want to also give Shelley a clue related to number one, the the continent it's in, and number two, how ICAO codes can be interpreted, right? So I guess the second, third, and fourth letter are the most significant here. The first one is not really.
Yes, that is
Yeah.
true. So we're in Europe with
Yeah.
this code, and it was a bit of a trick question. So some people might think it's Hamburg with the HAM, but in fact it's not. So
Oh, I thought it was Hamburg. Okay.
no, it's not. I tricked Ashwin too. It is actually Amsterdam.
Oh, it's Schiphol. Okay.
It's Schiphol Airport. It is. So the ICAO code, it's interesting. So the IATA code that you use on baggage tags and your itineraries is AMS, Amsterdam, very self-explanatory. But the ICAO code used for air traffic control and other purposes, it's actually the HAM. So, yeah.
Not
All right.
confusing at all.
Last question, airline related. So I've removed in this picture the logos and branding of the airline of this airplane. But can you tell what airline it is with the remaining color scheme of the airplane? So for those that can't see, it's a light blue with a light gray cheat line just below the windows and then a white belly.
You've got me on this one. It's not one that I believe I've ever flown.
Ashwin, do you want to venture a guess?
KLM.
Oh, that could be it.
Wrong continent.
Korean
But
Air.
similar coloring, blue,
Wow.
yes. But it is actually Korean Air. Korean Air has the light blue on the top and the gray cheat line. There you have it. Well, thank you, Shelley, for participating. Hopefully you learned something today and our listeners too.
Oh, I definitely learned something today, and I really appreciate being included in this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, and Shelley, as you can see, Peter likes to make things tough in terms of trivia. Not even I mean, half the time I don't know what's going on. So
Okay, well, I don't feel too bad.
oh no, you
Yeah,
shouldn't.
I feel
It's a
bad.
learning.
I
It's a learning
have
opportunity.
I have a deep aviation trivia brain, unfortunately. Sorry.
Awesome.
Wait, we might have to get you drinking some wine, and then it could really expand your knowledge base.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Shelley, thanks a lot. This has been very insightful and educational, and good luck with all the great work and with the IAWA as well.
Well, thank you again, gentlemen, for your time and to all the listeners as well.
Thanks for joining us this week. Send us any feedback, trivia ideas, or future topics you may have to our email at aeropedia.podcast@gmail.com. See you on the next leg of our journey.
Bye for now.
Departure any heavy, contact departure 119.2, good night.
119.2, speed at 290 heavy, good night.